They said she smiled too much for someone who never spoke. In the glittering ballrooms of London, where gossip flowed more freely than champagne and reputations were built on whispers, Nora existed in the shadows. Not as a guest, mind you, never as a guest. She was the girl in the modest yellow dress, the one who carried trays, fetid shawls, and disappeared into corners like morning mist. But here's what the sharp-tongued matrons didn't know. Nora was watching them all. From her station near the servants' entrance of the Ashford townhouse, she observed everything. Lady Pemberton's stolen glances at the married Lord Halifax. Miss Weatherby's tears hastily wiped away before entering the drawing-room. The way young gentlemen's eyes lingered on fortunes rather than faces. Nora saw it all and said nothing, because Nora never spoke. Well, barely. Yes, ma'am, here, right away, sir, there. Nothing more. The Ton had invented 1,000 stories about her silence. Some whispered she'd been cursed by a vengeful witch. Others claimed she was mute from birth, a tragedy that somehow made her beautiful face even more pitiable. The truth? The truth was locked away in Nora's heart, behind a smile that never quite reached her amber eyes. She'd been found on the Ashford doorstep 20 years ago, wrapped in a torn yellow blanket with nothing but a small silver locket around her tiny neck. Inside the locket, 2 miniature portraits, worn and faded, of people she would never know. Lord and Lady Ashford had taken her in not out of charity, but out of convenience. Another pair of hands for the household. By the time Nora turned 8, she was mending linens. At 12, she was serving tea. At 20, she had become invisible. Invisible to everyone except one man. The morning began like any other lie. Nora stood before her tiny mirror in the servants' quarters, pinning her copper hair into a simple knot. Her dress a creation of her own hands, sewn from leftover fabric Lady Ashford had discarded, was the color of morning sunshine. Yellow suited her, she thought. It made her feel less like a shadow. "Nora!" Lady Ashford's shrill voice echoed through the corridor. "The market." "I need fresh strawberries for this afternoon's tea. Lord Pemberton and his insufferable wife are coming, and I won't have them saying we served them last week's fruit." Nora descended the stairs, curtsied, and took the small purse of coins Lady Ashford thrust at her. "No, please. No, thank you." Just the expectation that Nora would vanish and return with perfection. The morning market of Mayfair buzzed with life. Vendors called out their wares, servants haggled over prices, and somewhere a violin played a melancholy tune. Nora moved through the crowd like water, selecting the ripest strawberries, the freshest cream, a small bundle of lavender, because it smelled like hope. She was balancing her purchases carefully when it happened. A carriage sleek, black, bearing a crest of silver wolves stopped abruptly. The door swung open. A man stepped out, tall and imposing, his tailcoat perfectly fitted, his dark hair swept back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings. And Nora, distracted by a child chasing a hoop, walked directly into him. Strawberries exploded across the cobblestones like crimson confetti. Cream splattered. The lavender scattered. "Oh!" Nora gasped, her only sound dropping to her knees immediately to gather the ruined goods. Her cheeks burned with shame. She didn't dare look up. But then a hand appeared in her line of vision. Strong, gloved, extended toward her. "Allow me," said a voice like aged whiskey smooth, rich, with an edge that suggested danger. Nora finally looked up. The man was staring at her with the most peculiar expression. Not anger, not irritation, something else entirely. His eyes, gray as a winter storm, studied her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm terribly sorry, he said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. I should have warned my driver to stop more gradually. Nora's fingers trembled as she tried to salvage a strawberry. It was crushed. They were all crushed. Lady Ashford would be furious. The gentleman actually knelt, beside her on the dirty street. These are quite ruined, he observed. Please allow me to replace them. He gestured to his footman. Wilson, pay the fruit vendor for his finest selection. And the flower seller. In fact, triple the order. Sir, that's not, Nora began, then stopped. She so rarely spoke that her own voice sounded foreign to her ears. Those gray eyes sharpened. You can speak. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation. Or perhaps a discovery. Nora felt panic rise in her chest. She gathered her ruined purchases and scrambled to her feet, ready to flee. But he caught her wrist, gently. So gently it was barely a touch. Your smile, he said quietly, and there was something in his voice that made Nora's carefully constructed walls tremble. It doesn't match your eyes. And just like that, in the middle of a crowded market, with strawberry juice staining her yellow dress and the whole world watching, Nora felt truly seen for the first time in her life. She pulled away and ran. Behind her, the Duke of Ashbourne, though she didn't know his name yet, watched her disappear into the crowd, a slow smile spreading across his usually stern face. Wilson, he said to his footman, never taking his eyes off the spot where the girl in yellow had vanished. Find out everything about her, everything. You did what? Lady Ashford's screech could have shattered crystal. Nora stood in the parlor, head bowed, hands clasped, while her mistress raged. Do you have any idea how mortifying this is? The Duke of Ashbourne himself sent a footman to inquire about you. About you? A mere servant. What scandal have you brought to this house? Nora said nothing. She'd learned long ago that silence was her only shield. Lord Ashford, reading his newspaper by the fire, finally spoke. Georgiana, calm yourself. Perhaps the girl caught the Duke's eye. That's not a crime. Caught his eye? Lady Ashford's face turned an alarming shade of puce. Theodore, she's a foundling, a nobody. We took her in out of Christian charity, and this is how she repays us? By attracting the attention of one of the wealthiest men in England? Actually, drawled a new voice from the doorway, I'd argue I'm the wealthiest. Everyone froze. The Duke of Ashbourne stood in the entrance of the Ashford parlor, looking entirely too comfortable in his perfectly tailored morning coat. His cravat was tied in a style Nora had seen fashion plates struggle to replicate. His boots shone like midnight, and his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, were fixed on her. Lady Ashford transformed instantly. Your Grace! What an unexpected honor. Please do sit. Shall I call for tea? Nora, don't just stand there like a simpleton. Oh, but perhaps not Nora. I'll fetch Betsy. I came to speak about Nora, actually. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Lord Ashford set down his newspaper. Your Grace? The Duke moved into the room with the casual grace of a predator. I have a proposition, Lord Ashford. I'm in need of additional household staff. My housekeeper has been complaining about the lack of suitable help. I'd like to purchase Miss Nora's contract. Nora's head snapped up. Purchase? Lady Ashford's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Your Grace, surely, Nora, she's hardly £10,000. Silence. Even Lord Ashford looked stunned. 10,000? For a servant's contract? Lady Ashford's voice had gone faint. The Duke smiled, but it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who knew he'd already won. I'm known for being generous with my staff, Lady Ashford. Surely you wouldn't begrudge Miss Nora an opportunity for advancement? Nora found her voice, small and broken. Your Grace, I don't— The contract, the Duke said, his tone brooking no argument, includes a private cottage on my estate, education in letters and arithmetic, and a wardrobe befitting a member of my household. She want for nothing. Lord Ashford was already reaching for his desk drawer. £10,000 could repair the roof, pay off debts, buy new horses. Theodore, Lady Ashford hissed. What will people say? They'll say we're fortunate, Lord Ashford replied, pulling out Nora's papers, the documents that bound her to the family that had never been her family. And frankly, Georgiana, £10,000 buys a great deal of silence. Nora watched as Lord Ashford signed her life away. Again, the same way someone had signed her away on that doorstep 20 years ago. The Duke accepted the papers, folded them precisely, and tucked them into his coat. Then he turned to Nora. Pack your belongings, Miss Nora. My carriage will return for you at sunset. But why? The question escaped before Nora could stop it. Why me? Those gray eyes held hers, and for a moment the busy parlor, the gaping Ashfords, the whole glittering, cruel world of London society disappeared. Because, the Duke said quietly, someone should finally see you smile for real. And he left, taking Nora's future with him. The carriage ride to Ashbourne Castle took 3 hours. 3 hours of Nora sitting alone in the most luxurious vehicle she'd ever occupied, her meager belongings in a small cloth bag, her mind spinning with questions. The interior was upholstered in midnight blue velvet. Small crystal lamps swayed gently with the motion, casting dancing lights across the polished wood panels. She'd sewn 3 dresses in her life. The yellow one she wore, a cream one for Sundays, and a pale green one for spring. All made from scraps. All modest, high-necked, appropriate for a servant. What would she wear in a duke's household? What would she do? Why had he bought her? That last question haunted her most of. All men didn't spend £10,000 on servants. They spent it on horses, jewels for their mistresses, not on silent girls who'd been abandoned as babies, unless. Nora's hands clenched in her lap. She wasn't naive. She knew what some powerful men wanted from vulnerable women. But something about the Duke's eyes, the way he looked at her smile, and seeing the lie beneath it that didn't feel like lust. It felt like recognition. The carriage passed through iron gates that stretched so high they seemed to touch the clouds. The drive was lined with ancient oaks, their branches forming a tunnel of green. And then, as the sun began its descent, Ashbourne Castle emerged. It wasn't a castle in the medieval sense. It was a manor house that could have housed a small village. 3 stories of honey-colored stone, countless windows glinting like diamonds, gardens that rolled out in every direction like green seas, fountains, statues, a lake that reflected the pink gold sky. Nora had never seen anything so beautiful. The carriage stopped at the main entrance. A footman immediately appeared to open her door, offering his hand as though she were a lady, not a purchased servant. Miss Nora, said a woman's voice, warm, cultured, kind. Welcome to Ashbourne. The speaker was perhaps 50, dressed in elegant black silk, her gray-streaked hair arranged perfectly. The housekeeper, Nora assumed. Mrs. ... Mrs. Winters, the woman said, as if reading Nora's mind. I manage his Grace's household. Come, dear. You must be exhausted. Nora opened her mouth to respond, but old habits died hard. She simply nodded. Mrs. Winters led her not to the servants' quarters, but through the main entrance. through a foyer with floors of black and white marble arranged in dizzying patterns, past rooms filled with paintings that belonged in museums, up a grand staircase with banisters carved to look like ivy. "His Grace has requested you be given the Rose Suite," Mrs. Winters said, opening a door on the second floor. Nora stepped inside and forgot how to breathe. The room was larger than the entire servants' quarters at the Ashford house. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in rose-colored silk. A writing desk sat before tall windows that overlooked the gardens. A wardrobe that could have held 50 dresses. And in the corner, a private vanity with a mirror framed in gold. "There's been a mistake," Nora whispered. "No mistake, dear." Mrs. Winters smiled. "His Grace was quite specific. You're not a servant here, Miss Nora. You're His Grace's project." "Project?" He didn't explain. Mrs. Winters tilted her head. "Well, that's the Duke for you." Mysterious as midnight. "He said only that you were to be given every comfort, every education, every opportunity. He's hired tutors. A seamstress will arrive tomorrow to measure you for new gowns. You'll dine in the family dining room. You'll have access to the library, and ... Mrs. Winters paused, her expression softening. "He said to tell you that you don't have to smile unless you mean it." Nora sank onto the edge of the magnificent bed, her yellow dress looking painfully out of place against the silk. "Why?" she asked the empty air. "Why is he doing this?" Mrs. Winters moved to the door, then paused. "Perhaps, Miss Nora, you should ask him yourself. He takes brandy in the library every evening at 9. I suspect he'll be waiting for you." And with that, she was gone, leaving Nora alone in a room that felt like a dream. Or a trap. Nora almost didn't go. She spent 2 hours staring at her reflection in that golden mirror, trying to recognize herself. A bath had been drawn hot water, scented with lavender, in a copper tub that could fit 2 people. Soft towels. Soaps that smelled of roses and honey. She'd washed away years of grime from the Ashford house. Years of pretending. Years of silence. The cream dress her Sunday best looked shabby even after the bath. But it was all she had. She plaited her copper hair, pinned it carefully, and tried to look... what? Presentable. Grateful. Suspicious. At 5 minutes to 9, she made her decision. If she didn't go, she'd never get answers. And Nora had lived her entire life without answers. It was time to stop being a coward. The library wasn't hard to find. She simply followed the scent of leather and old paper and the warm glow of firelight spilling from an open door. The Duke stood before the fire, one hand resting on the mantel, a glass of amber liquid in the other. He'd removed his tailcoat. His white shirt was open at the collar, revealing a glimpse of throat that seemed almost scandalous. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, as though he'd been running his hands through it. "You look ... human, Miss Nora." He turned, and that small smile played at his lips again. "I was beginning to think you'd refuse me." "I considered it," Nora said, and was surprised by the steadiness of her voice. His eyebrows rose. "Honest, good, sit, please. Would you like tea? Wine?" "I'm afraid I'm not much of a host when it comes to propriety." Nora remained standing. "Why did you buy me?" "Straight to the point, Ben." The Duke moved to a side table, poured another glass brandy from the bottle's label, and held it out to her. When she didn't take it, he shrugged and set it on a nearby table. "Because you're a mystery, Miss Nora. I'm a servant." "You're a liar." The words hit like a slap. Nora took a step back. The Duke held up a hand. "Wait, let me explain. That morning in the market, when you smiled, it was perfect. Practiced. The smile of someone who's spent years learning exactly what expression to wear to avoid trouble. But your eyes? He moved closer, and Nora fought the urge to flee. Your eyes told a different story. Sadness, loneliness, a hunger for something you've never had. You don't know anything about me. No, he agreed. But I'd like to. Why? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his brandy as if it held answers. Finally, when I was 12 years old, my father brought me to London for the season. We attended a ball, my first. I was terrified, overwhelmed by the crowds, the noise, the expectations. I hid in the gardens and met a girl. He smiled at the memory. She was crying. When I asked why, she said she'd been told her whole life that she didn't matter, that she was invisible. And I thought, how could anyone be invisible when they shine that brightly? Nora's throat tightened. I never saw her again, the Duke continued. But I've spent my life noticing the people everyone else overlooks. The servants, the wallflowers, the ones society has decided aren't worth seeing. And when I saw you in that market, smiling your false smile, I saw her again, and I decided I wouldn't let you disappear. So this is charity? Nora heard the bitterness in her voice. No. The Duke set down his glass and crossed the distance between them. He stopped just close enough that Nora could feel the warmth radiating from him. This is fascination. You're a puzzle I can't solve, Miss Nora. You were left on a doorstep as a baby, yes. I investigated with nothing but a locket. You've spent 20 years serving a family that treated you like furniture. You've taught yourself to sew well enough that your dresses could rival London's best modistes. You're intelligent, observant, and you've learned to survive by making yourself small. He leaned in slightly. But you're not small. Are you? Nora's heart hammered. No one had ever seen her this clearly. It was terrifying, exhilarating. What do you want from me? She whispered. The truth. I want to help you find out who you are, where you came from, who left you on that doorstep, and why. I want to give you the education, the resources, the freedom to discover yourself. And in return, he paused. I want you to stop pretending to smile. That's all? That's everything. Nora stared at this strange, powerful man who depended her life in a single morning. And what if I discover I'm no one? What if there's no grand mystery, no secret heritage? What if I'm just unwanted? The Duke's expression softened. Then you'll still be seen, Miss Nora. You'll still matter. Because I saw you. And I won't look away. Something inside Nora's carefully constructed armor cracked. Just a little. Just enough. She reached for the brandy glass he'd poured and took a sip. It burned. She coughed. The Duke laughed, a real warm sound that transformed his entire face. Perhaps he'll start with tea after all. And despite everything, the strangeness, the impossibility, the sheer absurdity of her situation, Nora smiled. A small, tentative, genuine smile. For the first time in years, it reached her eyes. The gossip reached London within a week. The Duke of Ashbourne has taken a mysterious young woman into his household. Red hair. Common-born. Some say she was a servant. Others whisper she's a secret relation. But why, pray tell, would a man of his stature risk scandal for a nobody? Lady Ashford nearly fainted when she heard. Lord Pemberton speculated over cigars. The betting books at White's began filling with wagers about the Duke's intentions. But Ashbourne Castle, Nora existed in a world apart from London's poison. Her days developed a rhythm. Mornings with Miss Thornbury, a patient woman in her 40s who taught Nora to read beyond basic words. By the end of the first week, Nora was devouring novels, Miss Austen, of course, but also poetry, philosophy, histories that painted the world in colors she'd never imagined. Afternoons with Madame Beaumont, a French seamstress who'd fled Paris during the Revolution and now created gowns for duchesses. She measured Nora with artist precision, muttering in rapid French about les os magnifiques and la peau comme porcelaine. Yellow, Madame Beaumont declared on the third day, holding up a bolt of silk the color of daffodils. Is wrong for you, Sherry? Yellow is what you wore to hide. Now we dress you to be seen. She created gowns in emerald green, sapphire blue, deep rose, and one Nora's favorite in silver gray that seemed to shimmer like moonlight on water. Evenings belonged to the Duke. Every night at 9, Nora would find him in the library. Sometimes he'd be reading, sometimes reviewing estate documents, once memorably attempting to play a battered pianoforte in the corner with more enthusiasm than skill. My mother insisted I learn, he'd said, grimacing at a particularly sour note. I was terrible then, too. They talked. Or rather, the Duke talked, and gradually Nora joined in. She learned his name was Sebastian, that he'd inherited the dukedom at 16 when his father died suddenly, that he'd spent years building a fortune through strategic investments and careful management, that London society bored him but duty demanded his presence. Everyone wants something, he said one evening, swirling brandy in his glass. They'd fallen into a pattern him with brandy, her with tea, both curled in chairs before the fire like old friends. A connection to my title, access to my money, an advantageous marriage for their daughters. But no one asks what I want. What do you want? Nora asked. Sebastian looked at her for a long moment. To matter for something other than my name. Nora understood that better than he knew. On the 10th night, she finally told him about the locket. She'd kept it hidden since childhood, afraid Lady Ashford would confiscate it. Now she drew it from beneath her nightgown she'd taken to wearing her own nightclothes to the library, a scandalous informality that Sebastian never commented on. The locket was silver, tarnished with age. Inside, 2 miniature portraits faced each other. A woman with copper hair like Nora's, wearing a dress of pale blue. A man with kind eyes and a hint of a smile. Your parents? Sebastian asked softly. I don't know. I've looked at these faces my whole life, trying to see myself in them. But I don't know who they are. I don't know if they loved me or abandoned me. I don't know anything. Sebastian took the locket carefully, examining it in the firelight. Then he did something unexpected. He pulled a small magnifying glass from his desk drawer and studied the portraits with intense focus. There, he said finally, pointing to a tiny detail in the corner of the woman's portrait. Do you see that? Nora leaned close, so close she could smell the scent of sandalwood and something uniquely Sebastian, and squinted at where he indicated. A coat of arms, barely visible, incorporated into the painted background. Someone with heraldic knowledge painted these, Sebastian said. This isn't the work of a common portraitist. And that coat of arms. I've seen it before, but I can't place where. Hope, dangerous and fragile, bloomed in Nora's chest. Can you find out? Sebastian closed the locket and placed it carefully in her palm, his fingers lingering against hers for just a moment. I'll find out everything, Nora. I promise you that. It was the first time he called her just Nora, without the miss. The intimacy of it sent warmth through her entire body. Why are you doing this? She asked. Not the first time she'd asked, but perhaps the first time she truly wanted to know. You've given me everything. Comfort, education, hope. What do you gain? Sebastian smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed him from the stern duke of society gossip into someone achingly human. Would you believe me if I said your company is payment enough? No, honest to the end. He stood, walked to the window overlooking the moonlit gardens. I'm lonely, Nora, surrounded by 100 staff, society, sycophants, and utterly alone. But when you're here, in this room, drinking your tea and challenging my assumptions about the world, I don't feel alone. And that, my dear mysterious girl, is worth more than 10,000 pounds. Nora joined him at the window. Their reflections overlapped in the glass. Sebastian? Yes? Thank you for seeing me. He turned to face her fully. They stood inches apart, close enough that Nora could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. Close enough that when he reached up to tuck a strand of copper hair behind her ear, his fingertips brushed her cheek with devastating gentleness. Nora, he said quietly, I think I've been looking for you my whole life. And then because the universe has a wicked sense of timing, the library door burst open. Mrs. Winters stood in the doorway, her usually composed face flushed with alarm. Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but you have visitors from London. Lord and Lady Fairfax? They're in the drawing room and they're demanding to know about the mysterious redhead you've hidden away, finished a cold, feminine voice. A woman swept past Mrs. Winters with the authority of someone who'd never been told no. She was perhaps 30, beautiful in the way of ice sculptures, perfectly formed and utterly cold. Her gown was the height of fashion, her blonde hair arranged in elaborate curls, her expression one of supreme disdain as her eyes landed on Nora. So, she said, her voice dripping poison, this is her. The servant who's caught your attention, Sebastian. How ... Quaint. Sebastian's entire demeanor changed. The warmth vanished. The Duke of London society emerged cold, controlled, dangerous. Lady Fairfax, he said, his tone arctic. To what do I owe this unannounced intrusion? Oh, don't be tedious, darling. Lady Fairfax circled Nora like a predator. All of London is talking about your new... What shall we call her? Pet project? Mistress? Nora felt the words like physical blows. That's enough, Sebastian began, but Lady Fairfax cut him off. Her name is Nora, isn't it? Found on a doorstep. No family, no fortune. No prospects. Tell me, dear, how does it feel to know you're the subject of every wagering book in London? They're betting on when His Grace will tire of you. I've put money on 3 months myself. Victoria. Sebastian's voice could have frozen hell. Leave now, Lady Fairfax smiled. Of course. But do give her the full picture, won't you? Tell her about our arrangement. About how everyone knows you'll eventually marry me, scandal or no scandal. Tell her I said leave. The thunderous command echoed through the library. Even Lady Fairfax looked startled. She recovered quickly, dropping a mocking curtsy. Until the season begins, Your Grace, we'll see how your little project fares in the real world. Her eyes cut to Nora. Do try to smile, dear. I hear that's all you're good for. She swept out, leaving poisonous silence in her wake. Nora stood frozen, the carefully constructed hope of the past weeks crumbling. Is it true? She asked quietly. The arrangement with Lady Fairfax? Sebastian reached for her. Nora, she stepped back. Is it true? His jaw tightened. There was a ... discussion, years ago, between our families, but nothing was ever finalized. Nothing was, so London expects you to marry her. London can go to hell. And I'm just the scandal between now and then. The mysterious project. The entertainment when you do your duty. That's not Nora. Listen to me. But Nora was already moving toward the door. The dress she wore, the beautiful silver gray that had made her feel seen, now felt like a costume. Like playing dress up in someone else's life. "I was right the first time," she said, not looking back. "I am no one. I was foolish to think otherwise." "Nora!" She ran through the corridors of Ashbourne Castle, past startled servants, up the grand staircase to the rose suite that had never really been hers. She locked the door behind her, pressed her back against it, and finally let herself break. The tears came silently. They always did. Because even now, even heartbroken, Nora had learned long ago that nobody cared if you cried. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks in which Nora refused to see Sebastian. She took her meals in her room. She continued her lessons with Miss Thornberry, but spoke only when necessary. She walked the gardens alone. Always at times when the Duke would be occupied with his state business, Mrs. Winters tried to intervene. "Miss Nora, His Grace is beside himself. He hasn't slept. He's barely eating. Won't you at least speak with him?" But Nora couldn't, because Lady Fairfax's poison had done its work. Every doubt, every fear, every whisper of "you don't belong" had been validated. Until the invitation arrived. It was delivered on thick cream paper, sealed with red wax, addressed to Miss Nora, ward of the Duke of Ashbourne. Ward, not servant. Not mistress. Ward. The invitation was for the Duchess of Kensington season, opening ball of the most important social event in London. And it included Nora's name. Mrs. Winters found her staring at it in the rose suite. "He's giving you a choice," the housekeeper said gently. "Go to London. Face society. Prove you're more than their gossip. Or stay here, safe but hidden, and never know what you might become. He's orchestrating my humiliation." "No, dear. He's offering you armor, look." Mrs. Winters opened the wardrobe and Nora gasped. Inside hung a gown unlike anything she'd ever seen. Not the pretty dresses Madame Beaumont had created. This was a weapon. The silk was deep emerald, the color of forests at midnight. The bodice was embroidered with silver thread in patterns that resembled vines and roses. The neckline was modest but elegant. The skirt would float like water, and attached to the hanger was a note in Sebastian's handwriting for the girl who shouldn't have to hide anymore. "Face them with me. I'll be your shield." Nora touched the silk with trembling fingers. "I don't know how to be brave." "Then learn," Mrs. Winters said simply. "Start tonight." The journey to London took 4 hours. Nora sat alone in Sebastian's carriage. He traveled ahead 2 days prior, watching the countryside give way to the city. The emerald gown rustled with every movement. Madame Beaumont had arrived that morning to arrange Nora's hair in an elaborate style with tiny silver flowers woven through the copper strands. She looked like someone else. Someone confident. Someone who belonged. The lie made her sick. But she'd made her choice. She would attend. She would face London. And then she would decide whether to stay in this impossible world or disappear back into the shadows where she'd always belonged. The Kensington townhouse blazed with light. Carriages lined the street. Music and laughter spilled from the windows. Nora watched elegant couples ascend the steps, and terror clawed at her throat. She couldn't do this. But then the carriage door opened, and Sebastian was there. He'd always been handsome, that was undeniable. But tonight, in formal evening dress, he was devastating. Black tailcoat that fit like a second skin. White cravat tied perfectly. Hair brushed back to reveal those storm-gray eyes that had haunted her dreams. He looked at her. Really looked. And his expression transformed from careful neutrality to something that made her breath catch. Nora, he said softly. You single quotes read ... Terrified? Breathtaking. He offered his hand. Nora stared at it, remembering the first time he'd extended his hand to her in that market, when her world had been nothing but strawberries and survival. She took it. The moment her gloved fingers touched his, Sebastian smiled. I won't let them hurt you, he said. I promise. You can't promise that. Watch me. They ascended the steps together. The receiving line. The announcement. His Grace, the Duke of Ashbourne and his ward, Miss Nora. The ballroom fell silent. Every head turned. Every fan paused mid-flutter. Every conversation died. Nora felt hundreds of eyes dissecting her, judging, finding her wanting. Sebastian's hand tightened on hers. Brave, he murmured. And whatever you do, don't smile unless you mean it. She almost laughed. Almost. They descended into the ballroom like stepping into a lion's den. The crowd parted. Whispers followed them like smoke. That's her? Common born, I heard. Found on a doorstep like refuse. Look at that dress. She thinks she's one of us. Poor Sebastian. Imagine the scandal. Nora's nails dug into her palms beneath her gloves. She kept her chin high, her expression neutral, even as shame burned through her. Then Sebastian did something extraordinary. He stopped in the center of the ballroom, turned to face her fully, and bowed. A deep, formal bow reserved for ladies of the highest rank. Miss Nora, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, would you do me the honor of this dance? The whispers exploded. He's dancing with her. First, the opening waltz? Has he lost his mind? Nora stared at Sebastian's extended hand. This was a declaration. A statement to all of London society that she wasn't his servant, his mistress, his shameful secret. She was someone worthy of the Duke of Ashbourne's first dance. It was also a target on her back. I don't know how to waltz, she whispered. Sebastian's smile was wicked. Neither do half these peacocks. Follow my lead. Trust me. And because she was already falling, had been falling since that morning in the market, Nora placed her hand in his. The orchestra began. Sebastian's arm came around her waist, pulling her into the proper position. And then they were moving. Nora stumbled once. Sebastian studied her. She missed a step. He guided her back. And gradually, wonderfully, her body learned the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. They spun across the floor, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. You're doing beautifully, Sebastian said. I'm terrified. I know. But look at me. Only at me, she did. And in those gray eyes, she saw something that made her heart stutter. Something that looked dangerously like... Sebastian, she began. I need to tell you something, he said. That night with Lady Fairfax, Your Grace... A sharp voice cut through the music. My eye cut in. Sebastian's expression darkened. Lord Fairfax! How did that unexpected? Lord Fairfax was tall, broad, with the kind of blunt features that suggested too much inbreeding in his lineage. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Surely you wouldn't monopolize the mysterious Miss Nora all evening? London is dying to make her acquaintance. It wasn't a request. Sebastian's jaw tightened, but social convention trapped him. To refuse would be an insult. Only if the lady agrees. Lord Fairfax didn't wait for Nora's agreement. He simply took her hand from Sebastian's grasp and pulled her back into the waltz. His touch was nothing like Sebastian's. Where Sebastian had been gentle, guiding, Lord Fairfax gripped her waist too tightly. His breath smelled of wine. His eyes raked over her with undisguised interest. "So," he said, "you're the little foundling causing such a stir." Nora said nothing. "My wife is quite displeased, you know." She had her heart set on becoming the next Duchess of Ashburn. "Our families have been planning it for years. And then you appear." His grip tightened painfully. "Tell me, Miss Nora, what tricks did you use to ensnare him?" "I didn't. Of course you did. Girls like you always do. A pretty face, a sob story, perhaps some well-placed tears. But let me give you some advice." He leaned close, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. "Sebastian will tire of you. He always tires of his projects. And when he does, you'll have nothing. No family, no fortune, no future. So be smart. Take what you can now and disappear before this ends badly for you." The dance ended. Lord Fairfax released her with a mocking bow and melted back into the crowd. Nora stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by people who saw her as entertainment. A curiosity. A scandal. She couldn't breathe. The walls closed in. The whispers grew louder. Every eye judged her, found her lacking, confirmed what she'd always known. She didn't belong here. She didn't belong anywhere. She ran through the crowd, ignoring Sebastian's shout of her name, past shocked faces and delighted gossips. She burst through the ballroom doors into the cool night air of the terrace, gasping for breath that wouldn't come. "Nora!" Sebastian appeared behind her, his expression fierce. "What did Fairfax say to you?" "The truth." Her voice broke. "That I'm a mistake. That you'll tire of me. That I'm nothing but a scandal waiting to end." "That's not. It is." The words exploded from her. "Look at me, Sebastian. I'm the foundling who can barely read, who didn't know which fork to use at dinner until 3 weeks ago, who has no idea how to be whatever it is you want me to be. I want you to be you. I don't know who that is." Tears streamed down her face now, ruining whatever careful facade she'd maintained. "I've spent my whole life being invisible, being nothing, and now you pull me into the light and expect me to shine? I don't know how. I don't know who I am or where I came from or why anyone would abandon me, and trying to pretend I belong in your world is killing me." Sebastian closed the distance between them, then stopped pretending. He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Stop pretending to be what you think I want. Stop pretending to be what they expect. Just be Nora, the girl who sews dresses from scraps and makes them beautiful. The girl who devours books like she's starving. The girl who sees people really sees them in a way no one in that ballroom ever could. That Nora, she's the only one I want. Why?" The question was a sob. "Why do you want me?" Sebastian's thumb brushed away her tears. "Because," he said softly, "you're the first person in my entire life who's never wanted anything from me except honesty. Because when I'm with you, I'm not the Duke of Ashburn with all his duties and expectations. I'm just Sebastian. Because you make me laugh and challenge my assumptions and see the world in ways I never imagined. And because," he paused, his eyes searching hers, "because I'm falling in love with you, Nora. Have been since that morning in the market when you looked at me like I was just a man who'd ruined your strawberries." Nora's breath caught. "That's impossible. Why?" "Because dukes don't fall in love with nobody foundlings." Sebastian smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "This one does." And then he kissed her. It was nothing like the forced, stolen kisses Nora had witnessed between servants. This was gentle and fierce all at once. His lips against hers, tasting of brandy and something sweeter. His hands in her hair, scattering the silver flowers. her hands fisting in his tailcoat, pulling him closer, closer, because if this was a dream, she never wanted to wake. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "Stay," he whispered. "Face them with me. Let me help you find out who you are. And whatever we discover, whether you're the daughter of a duchess or a merchant or no one at all, it won't change how I feel." "You hear me, Nora?" Nothing could change it. Nora opened her mouth to respond. Well, 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 well. They sprang apart. Lady Fairfax stood in the terrace doorway, her expression triumphant. Behind her, a crowd of eager gossips pressed close, straining to see. "How touching," Lady Fairfax purred. The Duke and his little pet caught in a compromising position. At the season's opening ball, no less. Why, this is a scandal that will last for years. Sebastian stepped in front of Nora protectively. "Victoria, I'm warning you." "Warning me?" "Oh, Sebastian. You've just handed me everything I need to destroy her reputation completely. By tomorrow morning, all of London will know that Miss Nora, the mysterious foundling, has been conducting an illicit affair with you under the guise of being your ward. No respectable family will receive her. No man will marry her. She'd be ruined." Lady Fairfax's smile was vicious. "Unless, of course, you do the honorable thing and marry her yourself. But we both know that's impossible. A duke of your standing, marrying a nobody? Your family would disown you. Society would never forgive it. So what will it be, Your Grace? Your title and position? Or your little project?" The crowd murmured in agreement. The trap was perfect, diabolical. Nora felt something inside her shatter. This was it. The moment where reality crushed fantasy. Where she learned, once and for all, that girls like her didn't get happy endings. She stepped out from behind Sebastian. "Lady Fairfax is right," she said, her voice steady despite the breaking of her heart. "This was a mistake. I never should have come to London. I never should have—" She couldn't finish. Couldn't say fallen in love with him in front of these vultures. She turned to Sebastian. "Thank you, Your Grace, for your kindness. I'll return to Ashbourne Castle tonight and remove myself from your household in the morning. You've been more than generous." Nora, no. But she was already moving past him, past Lady Fairfax's triumphant sneer, past the gossiping crowd. She walked through the ballroom with her head high, even as her world crumbled. Behind her, she heard Sebastian's anguished shout, "Nora!" She didn't look back. She couldn't. Because if she did, she'd see the one person who'd ever truly seen her, and she'd lose what little courage she had left. Nora didn't return to Ashbourne Castle. She instructed Sebastian's coachman to take her to the only place she'd ever called home, the Ashford townhouse. Lord and Lady Ashford would be at the ball, which meant she could slip in, gather her few remaining possessions, and disappear into London's vast anonymity. She could become invisible again. It was what she was good at. The townhouse was dark when she arrived. A single candle burned in the servants' entrance. Nora slipped inside like a ghost, climbing the back stairs to the tiny room she'd once occupied. Everything was exactly as she'd left it. The narrow bed, the cracked mirror, the sense of suffocation she'd lived with for 20 years. She sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to break completely. She'd been a fool. A naive, ridiculous fool who'd believed just for a moment that she could be something more than what she was. That love could transcend the impossible gap between a duke and a foundling. But Lady Fairfax had been right. The world didn't work that way. "I thought I might find you here." Nora's head snapped up. Sebastian stood in the doorway, still in his evening clothes, his hair disheveled from riding, his expression fierce with determination. "You shouldn't be here," Nora said. "Neither should you." He stepped into the tiny room, somehow making it feel even smaller. "You ran again. I saved you from making a terrible mistake. The only mistake I'm making is letting you believe you're not worth fighting for." Sebastian crossed to her, kneeling before her so they were eye level. "Nora, listen to me. I don't care about the scandal. I don't care what London thinks. I don't care if my entire family disowns me, but I care." The words burst from her. "Don't you understand? If you marry me, you lose everything. Your position, your reputation, your place in society. And for what? For a girl who doesn't even know her own name. A girl with no past, no family, nothing to offer except herself." Sebastian took her hands. "Nora, you're not nothing. You've never been nothing. And I will spend the rest of my life proving that to you if you'll let me." "Sebastian, but first," he interrupted, "there's something you need to see." He pulled a letter from his coat pocket. The paper was old, yellowed with age. "After you left the ball, I was going to follow you immediately. But Mrs. Winters stopped me. She'd been searching the castle archives for information about your locket I'd asked her 2 weeks ago. And tonight she found this." Nora took the letter with trembling hands. The handwriting was elegant, feminine, urgent. "My dearest friend, if you're reading this, then I am dead, and my daughter is lost to me. I write this in desperation, praying someone will find it and understand. My name is Eleanor Ashby, daughter of the Earl of Ashby. I married for love against my family's wishes, a merchant named Thomas Gray. We were happy, blissfully so, until my father discovered our union. He threatened to have Thomas killed to destroy everything we'd built, unless I renounced my marriage and returned home. I could not, so we fled. We lived simply, joyfully, in a small cottage far from London's cruelties. And then I became pregnant. My daughter was born on a spring morning with copper hair like mine in her father's gentle eyes. We named her Leonora Little Light. She was perfect. But my father found us. He came with soldiers, with threats, with the power to destroy us all. He gave me a choice: return to his house, marry the man he'd chosen, and watch Thomas hang for corrupting an earl's daughter. Or give up our child, let her be raised in secret, and Thomas would be allowed to live. It was no choice at all. I held my daughter one last time. I placed her on the doorstep of a family I prayed would be kind. I left her the only things I could: a locket with our portraits, and the hope that one day she might find her way back to us. My father forced me to marry Lord Whitmore within the month. I died giving birth to his son 9 months later, my heart already buried with the daughter I abandoned. If you are reading this, if my Leonora survived, please tell her I loved her. Every day of my too short life, I loved her. And I'm so sorry." Eleanor Nora's hands shook so violently she nearly dropped the letter. "This can't be ... double quotes. There's more." Sebastian pulled out another document. "This is your baptismal record. Leonora Grace Gray, daughter of Eleanor Ashby and Thomas Gray, born April 1805, and Nora." His voice softened. "Your mother was the granddaughter of a duke. Your grandfather was the Earl of Ashby. You have noble blood, Nora. You're not common born. You never were." The room spun. 20 years of believing she was unwanted, discarded, worthless, shattered in an instant. "My mother didn't abandon me," Nora whispered. "She was forced. Yes. She loved me. Yes. And my father? Thomas Gray?" Sebastian's expression grew gentle. He died 3 years after your mother. Heartbreak, the records say. But he left something for you. He produced a small leather journal. His diary. He wrote to you in it, every year on your birthday, telling you about your mother, about their love, about his hope that someday you'd know the truth. Nora clutched the journal to her chest, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of shame or abandonment, but of grief and relief and overwhelming love. They wanted me, she sobbed. They both wanted me. Sebastian pulled her into his arms, holding her as she wept for parents she'd never known, for a love that had sacrificed everything, for the truth that changed everything. When her tears finally subsided, Sebastian told her face up to his. The Earl of Ashby is long dead, but his title and estate passed to his son, your uncle. Lord Whitmore, your half-brother, controls the family now. And Nora ... He paused. He's been searching for you. What? Your mother left clues. Notes hidden in her belongings. Lord Whitmore found them after his father died. He's been trying to locate you for 5 years. He wants to acknowledge you, legitimize you, make you an Ashby heir. Nora's mind reeled. I'm an heiress? Yes, with a considerable fortune, estates, and a place in society that no one can question. The irony was almost laughable. She'd spent the evening being humiliated for being nobody, when all along she'd been somebody. Lady Fairfax will choke on this news, Nora said, and despite everything, a small smile tugged at her lips. Sebastian laughed a real, joyful sound. She will indeed. Then his expression turned serious. But Nora, I need you to understand something. Even if none of this were true, if you truly were just a foundling with no family and no fortune, my feelings wouldn't change. I fell in love with you, not your lineage, not your potential inheritance, you. Nora looked at this extraordinary man who'd seen her when she was invisible, who'd fought for her when she couldn't fight for herself, who'd given her everything without expecting anything in return. Sebastian, she said softly, I love you too. I think I have since that morning in the market when you knelt in the street beside me and saw that my smile was a lie. His eyes lit up. Say that again. Which part? The part where you love me? Nora smiled, a real, genuine, soul-deep smile that reached every part of her. I love you, Sebastian, completely, impossibly, even though you're terribly aristocratic and can't play the pianoforte to save your life. Sebastian laughed and pulled her close, kissing her with a passion that made her forget they were in a cramped servant's room in a house where she'd once been invisible. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Sebastian said, Marry me? What? Marry me? Not because of scandal or duty or your newfound title. Marry me because I can't imagine spending another day without you. Because you make me laugh and challenge me and see the world in ways that make everything brighter. Marry me because I love you, Nora, just as you are. Nora's heart felt too full for her chest. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you. Sebastian kissed her again, and this time Nora kissed him back with all the hope and love and joy that had been locked inside her for so long. Outside, London slept, unaware that a scandal was about to transform into a love story. And somewhere, Nora liked to think, her parents were finally at peace. The news broke over London like a summer storm. Miss Nora, ward of the Duke of Ashbourne, is revealed to be Lady Leonora Ashby, granddaughter of the late Duke of Ashby and rightful heir to the Ashby fortune. Lord Whitmore has publicly acknowledged her as his half-sister and petitions the House of Lords for her full restoration. The scandal shifted overnight. Suddenly, the mysterious foundling was an aristocrat in disguise. The gossips who'd mocked her scrambled to revise their opinions. Invitations flooded Ashbourne Castle. And Lady Fairfax? She'd taken to her rooms with a mysterious illness that everyone knew was mortification. The formal introduction happened at Lord Whitmore's residence, a grand London townhouse that should have been Nora's childhood home. Lord Whitmore was in his late 30s, with kind eyes that reminded Nora painfully of the miniature portrait of her father. When she entered his study, he stared at her for a long moment, then his eyes filled with tears. "You have her hair," he said hoarsely. "Our mother's hair." And her smile when it's real. Nora touched her locket. "I'm told we have the same eyes, too. Forgive me." Lord Whitmore crossed to her, taking her hands. "I should have found you sooner." "I should have. You were a child when she died," Nora said gently. "None of this was your fault. Nevertheless, you suffered. And I intend to make amends." He handed her a portfolio. "The Ashby estates. Your mother's inheritance. Everything that should have been hers and yours. I've had my solicitors draw up the papers. Half of everything is yours by rights." Nora stared at the documents. Properties, investments, a fortune that would make her one of the wealthiest women in England. "I don't need," she began. "But you deserve it," Lord Whitmore interrupted firmly. "And more than that, you deserve the truth. Our father was a cruel man, Nora. He destroyed our mother for daring to love freely. He would have destroyed you too, had he known where you were. But he's gone now, and you're here. And I would very much like to know my sister, if you'll allow it." Nora looked at this man, her brother, and saw genuine hope in his eyes. Family. The thing she'd always wanted and never thought she'd have. "I'd like that too," she said. Lord Whitmore smiled her mother's smile, and Nora felt another piece of her broken heart heal. The official engagement announcement appeared in the Times 3 days later. The Duke of Ashbourne is pleased to announce his betrothal to Lady Leonora Ashby, daughter of the late Eleanor Ashby and Thomas Grey. The wedding will take place at St. George's, Hanover Square, at the close of the season. London exploded with speculation. Was it a love match? A strategic alliance? Had the Duke known about Nora's heritage all along? He hadn't, but he delighted in letting people wonder. The true revelation came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Winters. "I have a confession," she told Nora over tea one afternoon at Ashbourne Castle. They'd become friends in the weeks since the ball, an unlikely friendship between a noblewoman and a housekeeper, but then Nora had never cared much for convention. "What confession?" Nora asked, sampling one of Cook's excellent biscuits. Mrs. Winters looked uncomfortable. "The night you arrived at Ashbourne, His Grace told me something. He said he'd seen you in the market, seen how the Ashfords treated you, and immediately knew you were meant for something more. But that's not entirely true." Nora set down her teacup. "What do you mean?" "He'd been searching for you for months before that market encounter." "What?" Mrs. Winters pulled out a worn sketchbook. 5 years ago, when Lord Whitmore began looking for Eleanor Ashby's lost daughter, he hired investigators. One of them sketched this from the portrait in your locket. She opened the book to reveal a drawing a young woman with copper hair and amber eyes. Nora's mother. But also Nora herself. The investigator showed this sketch to every household in London, Mrs. Winters continued. Sebastian saw it, and he recognized you immediately. He'd seen you serving at various social functions, invisible to everyone else, but not to him. So he started investigating. He found out about the Ashfords, about how they'd taken in a foundling baby, and he realized you were Eleanor Ashby's lost daughter. Nora's mind reeled. So the market encounter, was orchestrated. He had his driver stop specifically when you were shopping. He wanted to meet you to confirm his suspicions. And when he saw you, Mrs. Winters smiled. He fell in love immediately. But he knew you'd never believe him if he simply appeared and said, "You're secretly an heiress and I want to marry you." So he bought your contract, brought you here, helped you discover the truth yourself. "He's known all along," Nora whispered. "He knew who I was and never told me, because he wanted you to find out on your own terms, to grow into yourself naturally without the pressure of expectations. And because," Mrs. Winters hesitated, "because he wanted to ensure you loved him for himself, not his title or his help. He's been used by fortune hunters his entire life, Nora. He needed to know your feelings were real." Nora stood abruptly. "Where is he?" "The library." "Where else?" Nora burst into the library without knocking. Sebastian looked up from his desk, startled. "Nora? Is everything you knew?" She crossed the room in quick strides. "You knew who I was from the beginning." His expression shifted from surprise to resignation. "Mrs. Winters told you. Did you plan to tell me? Ever?" "Yes, after you found out yourself. After you'd had time to process everything." Sebastian stood, coming around the desk. "Nora, I know how this looks. It looks like you lied to me." "I never lied. I simply didn't tell you everything immediately." "That's the same thing." "Is it?" Sebastian's voice rose to match hers. "If I'd arrived at the Ashford house and announced, 'Hello, you're secretly a noble woman and I'm here to rescue you,' would you have believed me? Would you have trusted me? Or would you have thought I was a madman or a con artist?" Nora opened her mouth, then closed it. Because he was right. She would never have believed him. "You needed time," Sebastian continued, his voice softening. "Time to discover yourself without the weight of expectations. Time to learn that you were worth seeing, worth knowing, worth loving, regardless of your parentage. And yes, I needed time too. Time to prove that my feelings were real, that I wasn't just pursuing you because of your heritage. You could have told me after we ... Nora's voice dropped. "After we admitted our feelings?" "I know. And I'm sorry." Sebastian closed the distance between them. "But Nora, please understand. I fell in love with the girl in the market who smiled her false smile and had sadness in her eyes. I fell in love with the woman who devoured books and sewed beautiful dresses and saw people in ways no one else did." "That's who you are." The Ashby name, the fortune, the title, those are just details. You were always remarkable. You were always worth everything. Nora felt tears prick her eyes. "You're impossible, I know, and arrogant, frequently. And you orchestrated an elaborate scheme to win my heart." "Guilty." Sebastian smiled tentatively. "Is it working?" Nora wanted to stay angry. She really did. But she couldn't, because he was right about everything. She never would have believed him. She needed to discover herself on her own terms. And more importantly, she loved him. Desperately, completely, impossibly. "It's working," she admitted. "You infuriating, manipulative, wonderful man." Sebastian's smile transformed into something radiant. He pulled her into his arms, and Nora melted into his embrace. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "The Duke of Ashbourne loves Lady Leonora Ashby, but more importantly, Sebastian loves Nora. Just Nora, always Nora." "I love you too," Nora said. "Even though you're terrible at keeping secrets, Mrs. Winters." "Mrs. Winters." They both laughed, and it felt like coming home. St. George's Church had never seen anything like it. The ceremony was scheduled for mid-June, when London's roses were in full bloom and the weather was perfect for a society wedding. Every aristocrat in England had received an invitation. Even the king sent his regards, and a ridiculously expensive vase. But the real spectacle was the bride. Nora stood in the bride's chamber, staring at her reflection in disbelief. Madame Beaumont had outdone herself. The wedding gown was ivory silk that shimmered like pearls, with intricate lace overlay depicting roses and vines. The train was 6 feet long. The veil was secured with a diamond tiara, the Ashby family tiara, which Lord Whitmore had insisted she wear. "Mom would have loved to see this day," Lord Whitmore said, appearing in the doorway. He'd insisted on giving her away, and Nora had gratefully accepted. "You look exactly like her, beautiful, radiant, happy." "I'm happy," Nora said wonderingly. "For the first time in my life, I think I truly am." "Then let's not keep your Duke waiting." The processional music began. Nora took Lord Whitmore's arm, and together they walked toward future. The church was packed, every pew filled with London's elite, all craning to see the mysterious foundling-turned-heiress who captured the Duke of Ashbourne's heart. Nora saw familiar faces, Mrs. Winters dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, Miss Thornbury beaming with pride, Madame Beaumont nodding in satisfaction at her masterpiece. And there, in the front row, looking like she'd swallowed something sour, Lady Fairfax. Nora caught her eye and smiled. Aerial, genuine, triumphant smile. Lady Fairfax looked away first. But none of that mattered, because at the altar, looking devastating in formal dress, his eyes shining with love and joy and barely restrained emotion, stood Sebastian. When Nora reached him, he leaned close and whispered, "You're breathtaking." "You're not so bad yourself," she whispered back. The Archbishop of Canterbury began the ceremony. The vows were traditional, but when Sebastian slipped the ring onto Nora's finger, he added softly, "Thank you for letting me see you. The real you." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for looking. I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Archbishop declared. "You may kiss your bride, your grace." Sebastian pulled Nora into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, scandalously, in front of God and all of London society. The congregation erupted in applause and laughter. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and grinning, Sebastian whispered, "Ready to face the world, Duchess?" Nora looked at the sea of faces, some friendly, some envious, some still skeptical. But she wasn't afraid anymore, because she knew who she was now. Not just Lady Leonora Ashby, not just the Duchess of Ashbourne. Nora, the girl who'd survived abandonment and found herself anyway. The woman who'd learned that being seen was the greatest gift of all. "Ready," she said. They walked down the aisle together, hand in hand, toward a future that finally, wonderfully, belonged to them. The Ashbourne nursery was painted yellow. Nora had insisted. Yellow for hope, for sunshine, for new beginnings. Sebastian had simply smiled and ordered the painters. Now Nora sat in a rocking chair by the window, their daughter sleeping peacefully in her arms. Eleanor Rose Ashbourne, named for both grandmothers, had Sebastian's dark hair and Nora's amber eyes. She was 3 months old and absolutely perfect. "You're staring at her again," Sebastian said from the doorway. "I can't help it. She's miraculous." Sebastian crossed to them, leaning down to kiss first his daughter's forehead, then his wife's lips. "Like her mother." Nora smiled. Flatterer, truth-teller. Sebastian settled into the chair beside hers. "Lord Whitmore sent word. He's found more letters from your mother." hidden in the walls of Ashby Manor. Would you like to see them? Yes, Nora said immediately. I want to know everything about her, and someday I'll tell Eleanor. About the grandmother who loved so fiercely she gave up everything. About the grandfather who waited his whole life for a love that was stolen from him. About how their story, tragic as it was, led to her. And about her mother, Sebastian added, who was left on a doorstep and became a duchess, who taught me that being seen is the truest form of love. Nora leaned her head against his shoulder, careful not to wake the baby. Through the window, she could see Ashburn's gardens in full bloom, roses and lavender and sunshine. She thought about that girl in the yellow dress, smiling her false smile in the shadows. She thought about how much courage it had taken to step into the light. And she thought about how love, real, honest, transformative love, had changed everything. Sebastian? She said softly. Yes, thank you. For seeing me when I was invisible. For loving me when I couldn't love myself. For giving me a family, a home, a future. For everything. Sebastian kissed the top of her head. Thank you for letting me. For trusting me. For choosing to be seen. For being brave enough to believe you deserved happiness. Their daughter stirred in her sleep, making small, contented sounds. Nora looked down at her, this tiny person who would grow up knowing she was wanted, loved, cherished, who would never wonder if she belonged, or realized this was her greatest triumph. Not the title, not the fortune, not even the love story that had become London's favorite tale. This, breaking the cycle. Ensuring that her daughter would never feel invisible, unwanted, or alone. She knows she's loved, Nora whispered, more to herself than Sebastian. Every single day of her life, she know. Because you know what it's like not to, Sebastian said gently. And you'll make sure she never experiences that pain. We will, Nora corrected. We'll make sure together. Sebastian smiled and wrapped his arm around both his wife and daughter. They sat there in the yellow nursery, bathed in afternoon sunlight, a family built on hope and healing and the transformative power of being truly seen. I still can't believe you're hosting the most anticipated ball of the season, Lord Whitmore said, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing footman. The shy girl who could barely speak to anyone is now London's most celebrated hostess. Nora laughed, adjusting her emerald green gown, still her favorite color, the one that had armored her for her first ball. I'm not hosting alone. Sebastian does all the actual work. I simply smile and look decorative. That's a lie, Sebastian interjected, appearing at her side with Eleanor in his arms. Their daughter was dressed in a ridiculous confection of white lace and pink ribbons, looking like a very small, very grumpy angel. Nora organized every detail. I merely signed the checks and complained about the guest list, Nora added. Because you invited the Fairfaxes. I invited everyone who matters in society. That, unfortunately, includes them. As if summoned by her name, Lady Fairfax appeared in the receiving line. She'd aged poorly in 2 years. Bitterness had a way of doing that. Her smile was forced as she curtsied to Nora. Your Grace, she said stiffly. What a lovely home you have. Thank you, Lady Fairfax. Nora's smile was genuine, which somehow made it more devastating. I'm so glad you could attend. Please enjoy the evening. Lady Fairfax moved on quickly, her discomfort palpable. Lord Fairfax, however, paused. His expression was far more genuine and apologetic. Your Grace, I wanted to say, I'm sorry, for what I said to you at that first ball. It was cruel and unworthy. You've proven yourself to be everything a duchess should be. Nora studied him for a moment, remembering the fear and humiliation of that night. Then she smiled. Thank you, Lord Fairfax. That means more than you know. Water under the bridge. He bowed deeply and moved on, looking relieved. You're too forgiving, Sebastian murmured. No, Nora said. I'm just happy. And happiness is the best revenge. The ballroom at Ashbourne Castle rivaled anything London had to offer. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across the dancers. A full orchestra played in the gallery. Tables groaned under the weight of delicacies. And everywhere, people laughed and danced and celebrated. But the true magic happened in the library. Nora had insisted on opening it during the ball, a scandalous breach of etiquette, but she didn't care. She wanted people to see Sebastian's collection, to appreciate books the way she'd learned to. She found a young woman there, perhaps 16, standing before the shelves with naked longing on her face. Do you like to read? Nora asked gently. The girl jumped, nearly dropping her punch glass. Your Grace? I'm so sorry, I shouldn't be. I know the library's meant to be private. Nonsense. I opened it specifically so people could enjoy it. Nora moved to stand beside the girl. What draws you to the books? The girl blushed. My family doesn't approve of too much education for women. They say it makes us unmarriageable. But I love stories. I love learning. She looked down. I feel silly. Nora's heart squeezed. She saw herself in this girl hungry for something more, told she wasn't worthy of it. What's your name? She asked. Miss Catherine Thornberry, Your Grace. No relation to your former tutor. She added quickly. Though I wish I were. She's accomplished so much, Miss Thornberry. Nora took the girl's hand. Would you like to borrow some books? I could have them sent to your home discreetly. And if you'd like, I host a reading circle here twice a month. Young women who love literature. We'd be honored to have you. Catherine's eyes widened. Truly? Truly, because someone once gave me the gift of education when I thought I didn't deserve it. And I'd like to pay that forward. Tears welled in Catherine's eyes. Thank you, Your Grace. You have no idea what this means. But Nora did know. She knew exactly what it meant to be seen, to be valued, to be told you mattered. She squeezed Catherine's hand. Choose 3 books to start, and I'll see you at the next meeting. Later that night, after the last guest had departed and Eleanor was sleeping peacefully in the nursery, Nora and Sebastian found themselves back in the library. Their place where everything had begun. You created magic tonight, Sebastian said, pulling Nora into his arms. They swayed gently to music only they could hear. Did you see the way people looked at you? Not as the scandal or the mysterious foundling, but as the Duchess of Ashbourne, as someone they admire. I saw, Nora said. But more importantly, I saw that girl in the library. Catherine. She reminded me of myself 2 years ago, lost and looking for something more. And you gave her hope, just like I tried to give you. Nora leaned back to look at her husband. You gave me everything, Sebastian. But you know what I'm most grateful for? What? You taught me that I was worth seeing, that my voice mattered, that I deserved to take up space in the world. And now, she gestured toward the ballroom, the castle, the life they'd built. Now I get to teach others the same lesson. Girls like Catherine who think they're too much or not enough. Women who've been told to be small and silent. I get to show them a different way. Sebastian kissed her forehead. You're extraordinary, you know that? I'm just me, Nora, the girl you saw in the market. No, Sebastian corrected gently. You're Nora who learned to see herself. That's what makes you extraordinary. They stood there in the firelight, holding each other, two people who'd found each other against all odds. A duke who'd learned to look past society's expectations. A foundling who discovered she was worth far more than she'd ever imagined. Outside, snow began to fall, the first of the season. It covered Ashburn's gardens in white, transforming everything into something magical. Inside, Nora thought about her mother, Eleanor, who'd loved so fiercely and sacrificed so much. She thought about her father, Thomas, who'd chosen love over everything else. She thought about the baby left on a doorstep and the woman that baby had become. And she smiled. A real smile! One that reached every part of her. Because she'd learned the greatest truth of all. Being seen wasn't about title or fortune or position. It was about finding someone and being someone who saw past the masks to the real person underneath. It was about love. True love. The kind that transformed and healed and made everything possible. Sebastian? She whispered. Yes, my love. Thank you for seeing me. For saving me. For loving me. Always, he whispered back. For the rest of our lives and beyond. I will always see you, Nora. Always. And in that moment, in the library where their story had truly begun, surrounded by books and firelight and the promise of tomorrow, Nora knew with absolute certainty she was home. She was loved. She was seen. And she would never be invisible again. This story, dear reader, is about more than romance or scandal or the glittering world of Regency London. It's about something deeper, the universal human need to be seen, known, and loved for who we truly are. Nora's journey from invisible servant to celebrated. Duchess mirrors a truth we all face. We spend so much of our lives hiding, wearing masks, smiling false smiles, pretending to be smaller, quieter, less than we are because we've been told that's safer. But safety isn't the same as happiness. The real transformation in this story isn't Nora discovering her noble heritage. It's her learning to believe she was always worthy with or without a title, with or without a fortune. It's her finding the courage to step into the light and let herself be seen. And Sebastian? He represents what we all hope to find, someone who sees past our armor to the person underneath. Someone who loves us not despite our scars, but because of how those scars have shaped us. Their love story reminds us that the greatest gift we can give another person is the gift of truly seeing them, not what they pretend to be, not what society says they should be, but who they actually are in all their messy, complicated, beautiful humanity. So ask yourself, are you letting yourself be seen? Are you hiding behind false smiles and I'm fine when you're really breaking inside? Are you making yourself small because you think that's what the world wants? And more importantly, are you seeing the people around you? Really seeing them? The quiet ones, the overlooked ones, the ones society has decided don't matter. Because everyone has a story. Everyone is fighting battles we know nothing about. And sometimes all it takes is one person, one Sebastian, one friend, one stranger in a market to look at us and say, I see you. And you matter. That's the power of love. That's the power of connection. That's the power of being truly courageously seen. Thank you for reading Nora and Sebastian's story. I hope it touched your heart the way it touched mine while writing it. If you enjoyed this tale of second chances, found family, and the transformative power of love, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support means the world and helps us create more stories like this one. Hit that like button if Nora's journey resonated with you. Drop a comment telling me, what was your favorite moment? Was it the market meeting? The library conversations? The revelation of Nora's true identity? Or perhaps the triumphant moment when she faced Lady Fairfax with her head held high? And please share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who feels invisible. Someone who's waiting for their own moment to step into the light. Because stories have the power to heal, to inspire, to remind us that we're not alone. Remember, you are worthy of being seen. Your story matters. Your voice deserves to be heard. Now go out there and shine, dear reader. The world is waiting to see you. Until next time, happy reading.